Good morning, friends and family. As you can tell, this morning we are starting our video in the farm, and I'm working with the kids, showing them a few tricks, basically showing them how to harvest avocado using time-tested methods. There are a few people who may connect with us. Many city people may not understand what exactly I'm doing right now. But even though we are walking through the farm, doing really important lessons with the kids, I'm reminded of some really sad experiences in the village that I'm going to talk about, as the title suggests. So first, I want to remind folks about an incident that happened probably a year or 2 years ago in Kisii, where a man, Mr. Edward Morema, and his wife, Grace, were brutally murdered in their home after coming back for holiday. And a similar case also happened a few years back. And this was not fatal, but it happened to a very prominent person called Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I believe that must have been his first time coming back to Kenya. And his wife was brutally raped. And it turned out that whoever organized that just wanted them to get away. And so while I am a big champion of coming back and enjoying the village, I know the village is fantastic, but sometimes things can go wrong. And so, as we've always kept it 100%, today I'm just going to talk about some of the terrible things that can potentially happen. They're very rare, but they do happen, especially the fatal cases. Now, besides the fatal cases, there are other sins that are committed against returnees and people living in diaspora that I will be talking about in this video. So in this video, I will focus on the perils that people face having lived abroad and how to minimize risks depending on where you live. So I'm going to start by listing a number of perils that many folks have pointed out to me or that I've experienced myself. The first, which is also extremely rare, is this category of perils that is about targeted killings and rapes. Like I said, they happen, but they're extremely rare. And when they do happen, especially with targeted killings, many of them often have something to do with problems within the family, or some kind of a deal gone wrong, or a person just living in a dangerous neighborhood. And that is also similar with rapes that I've heard about. A lot of it is something happening within a family. The more common perils that almost every single diasporan experiences is exploitation and being taken advantage of. And I'll just highlight a few cases that folks have talked about. The first, which is the most common one, is financial exploitation, where folks start doing projects at home and then it just turns out into a big money pit where you send money and nothing tangible happens. Or people make up issues to get money out of you, whether it's fake illnesses, fees that is exaggerated, and so many other ways. Happens to almost every single one of us. And typically also with exploitation, there's been quite a few cases of people being guilt-tripped into spending more than they should. And when you're thinking about being taken advantage of, as a diasporan, when you are living in Kenya, the moment somebody notices you are a diasporan, you will likely pay more than what the average person pays, whether it's labor or it is something you're buying. And then, of course, when it comes to friendship, you get a mix of experiences. There's some really good, genuine friends, but then you also have friends who are less than genuine. And we'll talk about that later on. And on issues of land, I have seen folks who have really lost ancestral land being disinherited. You travel abroad, when you come back, your siblings have actually taken over your space and probably sold it, and you have nothing left. Or they actually let you build stuff. When you're done, then they start claiming it. So a lot of nonsense happens around land. And when you're purchasing stuff, sometimes they sell you stuff that are fake. I'll explain later. And then when it comes to issues of children and love, a lot of diasporans get taken advantage of using love and children, especially folks who left children with partners that they're not married to. I've seen people go through real hell. And then, of course, exploitation through religion, because there's a lot of con men and criminals running around religious circles, and they know how to milk money out of diasporans. Then, of course, another common one is catfishing, where people create fake profiles online, and then they sort of establish a connection with the diasporan. Next thing you know, the diasporan is sending tons and tons of money to these folks. Then the last one that I also want to highlight is on the issue of papers, where a diasporan is targeted specifically as a means of helping a person to get to any place abroad. Happens a lot. And then there are also others that I would just call things that are just designed to kill your spirit, especially around theft. Some of them are just petty thefts where, like in my case, before I secured my space, somebody would just come in and break like the water faucets and taps and things like that. Just minor petty thefts that are simply annoying. But then I've also seen cases where a person gets wiped out completely. They simply come in and just take everything from a person who returned. It happens, and it's really sad. And then other things that kill spirits are things like you assign some task to a person back at home, and they deliver extremely mediocre work, which ends up costing a lot of money to fix and time, and it's just unbelievable. Or sometimes, as a diasporan, you come and explain what you want. They simply ignore you and do exactly what they want. And this actually happened to me like about a week ago with my own tiling guy. Despite the fact that I'm home, the guy simply just ignored me and did his own thing. And he explained that, no, he knew I was wrong and just let me walk away. It's really sad. And particularly women, there's this tendency that women just get ignored, especially around land. You'll notice that they pay more attention if it's a man talking, saying the exact same thing. But if a woman talking, they would simply just ignore you. Of course, we've talked about fake friends, and the worst of it is often betrayal by absolutely trusted folks. Most often, family members. It's really sad out there. And so I have listened to stories, especially in the last couple of weeks that I've been running this channel. I have talked to people, listened to story after story about people working extremely hard and trusting all of their savings, all of their hard work to pick up a home, and things fall apart. Unfortunately, the majority of the cases, it's often people that are trusted, whether it's very close friends or family members and things like that. Oh, and by the way, one thing I say, I forgot to add it to one of the sessions. If you're going to lend money to anybody at home, be sure to lend money that your life does not really depend on. And don't ever give out money that your life depends on. Give it knowing that it may come back, it may not come back. It almost never works. Like in my case, besides my family members, 99% of the time I've lent money to somebody with the agreement that they'll return it, they never do. And they simply disappear. I've never understood why, because I've always thought that if something goes wrong, maybe the people I lend money to would just come back and explain, hey, here's what happened. Typically, they simply just disappear or pretend that nothing ever happened. So many of these stories are really prevalent out there. So let me explain some of the circumstances that we know make folks prime candidates for these types of things. Number one, often there's some kind of a family dispute or some ill feelings that family members have, a deal go wrong, or when a person is perceived as a threat around politics and land, then people can really do ugly things. That also applies to issues of rape, when they're simply trying to pass a message that we don't want you around. And with exploitation, a lot of it happens because, of course, many of us don't have the means to verify truth on the ground. Half the time we are gone, and then we've made ourselves very predictable, especially with travel. Like we show up in the summer or in December, so they can work around our schedule and really play around with us. And then with guilt tripping, I've seen many cases where diasporans get guilt tripped, especially by folks who have previously offered them help, whether they give some money during a fundraiser and things like that, or they guilt trip you through family. Like in my case, if you come to me through my mother, I'm more likely to pay attention. So people use things like that, or cultural ties. Or sometimes they actually just appeal to your softer side, using religion, children, and even vulnerable people. And for those who get taken advantage of, a lot of it happens because, in part, we don't know how much things cost us home. And so you'll pay more because they know you don't know how much you're supposed to pay. And then, of course, with issues of land, I think part of it is our ignorance as diasporans. And I'm using the term ignorance here not in a pejorative way. Ignorance here to mean just lack of awareness. Some of us don't know how issues of land work, and we don't choose to put in the work to find out. And so, because of our own laziness and ignorance, people take advantage of that. And so, again, sometimes we are also responsible in part to what folks do to us. Now, with regard to religion, a more common theme that I see is that many of us are hyper religious, and we are willing to suspend critical thinking to the point where you let somebody think for you. With that kind of environment, it's very easy for criminals in religion to take advantage of diasporan folks. So I've often said, never give up your mind to any human being. I don't care who that is. It doesn't matter whether it's your parent, your bishop, no matter who that is. You can never give up your mind to let somebody think for you. And then with catfishing, often they target very vulnerable men and women, especially single, lonely, middle-aged, stable folks who are really ready for love. They know how to zero in on those vulnerable folks. And then, of course, with the papers, exploitation around papers, it happens when many of us in diaspora folks travel from diaspora to come look for quote-unquote kienyeji spouses. And yeah, they can play around with you till they're able to get to diaspora, and then things fall apart. So here are some suggestions that I've seen folks put in place. Like I've said, they may or may not work for you, but it is something worth considering if you are a diasporan or if you're a person who in future might become a diasporan who returns home. So the first thing, generally avoid mixing business with family. It almost always ends in disaster. Unless you have an exceptional family like mine, where my folks have been exceptional. But in many cases, family often means trouble. And I say, do as much as you can in person. Be unpredictable. Don't just show up in December. Sometimes show up some random times. Critical thinking, I say, never give up your mind to any human beings. Deal with your own ignorance. Google is out there. Don't wait for people to get information for you. Right now, you can find anything you want out there. Deal with your own ignorance. And then make sure if it's land, you secure it. And use reputable professional companies for things like land purchase, security, legal advice. So don't just rely on your jobless nephew to take care of your home. I know it's cheaper, but it might end up in disaster. Pay a professional company. While also I accept that there are crooks within these companies too. Now, remember, your parents' relatives are not necessarily your relatives. You can choose your own relatives. Previous generations were forced to accept that. You can choose your relatives. Now, with catfishing, I really have no advice for this group, because when you choose to sit on a table, they are going to feed on you. And then the last two, you cannot solve all the problems on earth. Sometimes you just have to let the chips fall where they may. And then, of course, this is more like a no-brainer. To the extent possible, avoid unsafe neighborhoods. Many neighborhoods are safe, some are not. Again, I hope this was informative, and I'll see you in the next. Thank you.
But